Hi there and welcome to Hearthside. My name is Michelle. I'm the author on this blog. I've been working on creating accessible copies of my blog entries as videos. So I'm moving along. I'm currently in my VAR season, which is the spring season in Heathenry. Blog entries that I posted. There was a series of them, and this one is the second one called Sigrblót and Lunisolar Reckoning. So I've talked a little bit about Lunisolar Reckoning before in Reckoning Yule. This has to do with Sigrblót in particular. So I've been talking a little bit about spring traditions or VAR traditions in modern heathenry in my last post and my last video, and this is going into talking about Sigrblót because it was right before Sigrblót. So one of the things that when I'm talking in other heathen circles, not everybody follows the Lunisolar Reckoning for figuring out when their holidays are. So the result is I find myself trying to explain how things are reckoned using the Lunisolar Reckoning, and so the result is that I have a number of blog entries on this. Since it's something I use in my own practice and I have a fair amount of experience with now, then it's something that I think is worth sharing for those of you who want to use this method of reckoning but don't know where to start, and also just because it helps you understand the historical concepts and why the dates of the different heathen holidays are not really fixed, and it's sometimes hard to figure out when they are. It's because they're following this lunisolar calendar, basically. So the way that Lunisolar Reckoning works is there's fixed points, which are the solstices and the equinoxes, and those dates help to determine which moon is which. And the reason why it's important for having fixed dates to help determine which moon is which is because otherwise, eventually, Sigrblót would end up being in October, when currently we have usually winter nights, and it would eventually go back around again to where it should be in approximately April. But that's the way a purely lunar calendar works, is that because there's 13 moons approximately per year, it doesn't add up day-wise to 365, which is how many days it takes to go around the sun. So that means that the moons move a little bit each year, sort of in a circle. And it would be very slow, gradual over time. And yeah, so any societies that use a purely lunar calendar, this is what happens, is their holidays shift, which doesn't work within heathenry because our holidays are season dependent primarily. Just a second, I have a little bit of background noise, so I'm just going to take a break and I will be right back. Alright, so I think that's dealt with. So yeah, so the days in the lunar calendar, the important heathen holidays, are on or around the 3 days surrounding full moons. And each one is the full moon after the new moon, after either the solstice or equinox, depending on which holiday it is. So for Yule, it's the full moon after the new moon after the winter solstice. And in the case of Sigrblót, it would be the full moon after the new moon after the vernal or spring equinox. So I was explaining this to a group of people, and then it brought up another question which comes up quite commonly, which is, what do you celebrate instead of Ostera? Well, in my personal practice, I don't celebrate anything that would be similar to Ostera as a heathen. That said, my husband is a Christian, so our household still has Easter celebrations. But as a heathen and in my heathen practice, I don't celebrate anything similar to Ostera. The closest thing would be Sigrblót, and I don't consider it very close. So what do I celebrate instead of Ostera? Nothing. I don't try to replace it. That practice isn't meaningful to me. But lots of other heathens do, and that's perfectly fine, and that's well within their rights. This is just how I practice and how my tribe practices. So yeah, I don't recognize Ostera, which I believe falls on the vernal equinox, as a significant date in the sense of it being a holiday like Ostera. I do recognize that the vernal equinox is important, because without it I could not reckon when the date is for Sigrblót. So, I do pay some mind to the equinox, but it's not a day of celebration for me. So, lots of people celebrate Ostera, which is a celebration that is in many ways similar to Easter, but believed to predate Easter. I don't know very much about that. It's not something that I practice, so someone can fill me in with more details if they feel the need or whatever. I'm going to focus on Sigrblót, that's what I know. So, yeah, whatever is meaningful to you is what you should do. But yeah, the reason I don't celebrate it is because I'm following the Lunisolar Calendar. I'm not following a solar calendar, which to me, to celebrate equinoxes and the solstices is a solar calendar. Now, I do a little bit for the winter solstice, but only because I think it relates to Mother's Night, not to do with Yule specifically, but I feel like it has a little bit to do with Mother's Night. So I do that, but I also recognize that depending on where in Nordic countries, people wouldn't have known when the solstices occurred because of how either light or dark it was. It would have been entirely impossible to pinpoint that date. So as far as historical practice, I don't see that as being something that was celebrated. The equinoxes would have been possible for them to reckon, so historically they might have celebrated them. I don't see any evidence of that in the lore or other writing like Tacitus or whatever, but that doesn't mean that it didn't occur. It just means it wasn't recorded, right? So, yeah, that's where I'm coming from that. So to me, the important holy days within heathenry are Winter Night, Yule, Sigrblót, and additionally I add in Midsummer, which is not on the summer solstice in my reckoning, but rather it would line up as in the four spokes of a wheel, so that it would be the full moon after the new moon after the summer solstice. And that celebration around that time is also recorded in the Nordic Animist year as Old Midsummer. So usually it occurs in July. In Rune's book, he gives fixed dates for things because he's trying to pin everything to a solar calendar. In our practice, it wouldn't have an exact date, but it would be roughly July, just because that's when that moon is going to fall, as it's been basically secured by that solstice as being within a about 1 month radius, basically, where that moon can fall. So the same thing is true of Sigrblót. It can occur from anywhere just after the spring equinox into about the 2nd or 3rd of May. I was trying to look ahead and see, like, this year, just for funsies, how many years I could figure into the future when Sigrblót would be, and yeah, there was some, like, as late as, like, the 2nd, I think, of May that I saw in the next 30 years, so it can fall quite late after Walpurgis night, or May Day. So that is something to keep in mind. And yeah, that's basically how you reckon it. So those are the 4 holidays that I celebrate primarily. There are other, like, smaller traditions within my tribe and hearth that are also celebrated, but those are the ones that are general heathen holidays, I guess, that I celebrate. And like I already mentioned, I celebrate Mother's Night, which there's a few different dates when it could be. I celebrated the eve of the winter solstice. That's not the same as all of my tribe. Some of them do, some of them celebrate some other time, some of them don't celebrate it. Yeah, but I consider that part of, like, the 2-month Yule season, but not part of, like, the old Yule holiday, which is in January. So, in addition, as I said, I'm in an interfaith family, so that means that there's other holidays that I celebrate with my spouse. Some of them are Christian, some of them are secular holidays, etc., etc. His favorite is Victoria Day, which we have tea for, but I think it's a bit challenging in the same way that Canada Day is, in that it's almost celebrating colonialism. So, I mean, grain of salt with that. Whatever holidays might be associated with hearth are not necessarily heathen holidays, and as with a lot of holidays that are secular, they're still problematic for reasons like historical reasons within our country. So that one, Canada Day, Thanksgiving, all of them are a bit of a challenge to figure out the right line to draw there. So then, let's see. A lot of modern heathens don't celebrate Sigrblót. I think it's because primarily they don't know how you're supposed to celebrate it, because it's, if you translate the name, it's Victory Blót. So some might see that as very browsatru or not appropriate in a modern context where a lot of us aren't warriors, whatever. I don't think that's exactly, like, the truth of the situation, and that the idea that the victory that we're celebrating has to do with battle or Viking raids, I mean, maybe it did to some extent, but I think there's more to it than that. I see it as more of the connection with victory over winter. So it's the beginning of summer, it's the victory over the winter season. We've survived. Now we can get into the good season where we're able to grow more food, where it's not freezing cold and dark outside all the time. So I see it primarily as a fertility festival at the beginning of the summer season. So even though Sigrblót normally falls in April, that would be the beginning of summer in a bipartite year, a year that has 2 seasons. The Elder Heathens didn't see summer and winter the same way that we did. Like, when I think summer in a modern context and not heathen context, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I can go to the beach, like, whatever, it's gonna be hot. But that's not the way they were seeing it. They were seeing it as the division of light in the year, basically. And the division of what kind of tasks you were doing that time of year. So that's what you're celebrating, is the end of the winter season, the beginning of the summer season, which is more about going out into the world, doing things, meeting other people, being outside, exploring, growing things, creating your garden. It's the beginning of the season of abundance. Whereas in the winter, you're like retreating into your hearth and your home, into your halls with your kin, being very introspective, withdrawn, and kind of shutting out the world to some extent. I also find it to be a very creative time, and a good time to catch up on reading and all that sort of things. So yeah, those are the two seasons to me. So yeah, I see Sigrblót as the victory over winter. There's some elements of Var in it, which I discussed in my last entry about Var, which is the idea of it being the planting season, and there's definitely room to lend itself to having rites at that time that would have to do with planting and the beginning of the agricultural year. That's pretty much it for this one, so I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.